Okay, wonderful. Well, welcome and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Amy Hawkins. I am a career counselor with the Office of Career Services here at Columbus State. I'm also a licensed mental health counselor by trade and by education. And so this topic was really of interest to me. I've had some actually specific training in wellness counseling over the years. So I was just really, kind of intrigued in doing this topic and joining you today for a nice discussion. Getting used to the technology here. So I just wanted to briefly go over our agenda for the presentation. We're going to talk a little bit, and I know you've been talking in this series about the Wheel of Wellness. We're going to talk about it a little bit more this morning. In particular, there's a 12-factor model of wellness that we're going to talk about. And specifically, there are some self-direction tasks associated with that model. And in particular, those that are associated with occupational or workplace wellness. So we're going to address those this morning. We're also going to talk about behaviors and factors that support occupational wellness, how to make an informed career decision, in case there's any students in the audience that still need to kind of work through that process, which also lends to occupational wellness. Factors that contribute to intellectual wellness, because that's a subtopic of our morning session here, or afternoon. And then methods for improving intellectual wellness and cognitive functioning. So kind of have a lot to cover, and we're just going to dive right in. And I just wanted to let everybody know, as far as my presentation style, very open to your questions as we go. I know that Sophia Lombardo is working on manning the chat through the session. So students and staff, if you're in the audience and you have questions as we're talking, please feel free to go ahead and use the chat for that purpose. I am less good at looking and seeing hands as they pop up, so chat is probably better for questions. And we can kind of stop periodically and answer questions as we go. All right, so without further ado, I just wanted to bring this up. Why do we study wellness? And I think this is the fourth and last presentation in this series. So you've been talking about it all semester. I did find this quote, and I thought this was really pertinent. So wellness has been defined as the new paradigm in healthcare. It is a strengths-based approach. In counseling, we talk a lot about strengths-based, and it is a strengths-based approach to mental health care. And it is also defined as the paradigm, the in italics, for counseling and development. So really the whole field of counseling is rooted and ingrained in this concept of wellness. And I feel like in higher education, we are also rooted and ingrained in strengths-based. And wellness is all about strengths-based, and it's all about this idea of moving towards what is possible for ourselves in terms of an ideal state of being. It's not about perfection, and I really like to bring that up because I really hate that term perfection. I don't think it has any place in wellness. I think a better term is consistently striving toward. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. Wellness achievement can positively impact functioning across all life areas. We know this to be true. And it's also something that a person can strive for at any age. So there's a lot of research out there about who is well. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of like the Blue Zones research that was done several years ago. But people are thriving and, in these little pockets and places all over the world for a variety of reasons. And it's all people, hopefully like yourselves, that are interested in this concept of optimal living. I'm going to talk about this Wheel of Wellness model, and it's kind of a little bit like a maze. I realized when I put this slide together, so just try to follow me a little bit. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background information on the particular model that we're talking about today. So we know that the foremost researchers on this topic are Jane Myers, Tom Sweeney, and a man named Melvin Whitmer, okay? And Sweeney and Whitmer, and also Whitmer and Sweeney, developed the original Wheel of Wellness model based on principles from Adlerian School of Psychology. So Alfred Adler was a psychologist whose theory was based on individual psychology and this concept of holism, okay? And they took constructs from that. And then following extensive research of theory, and research across disciplines, they identified a handful of characteristics that correlated positively, or in other words, were associated with healthy living, quality of life, and longevity. Okay? So meaning, what helps us to live longer, have better quality of life. These were organized using Adler's proposed 3 major life tasks of work, friendship, and love. So those being the primary things that Adler felt that we focus on in this life: work, friendship, and love, along with 2 additional tasks of self and spirit, okay? And so this original Wheel of Wellness model included 7 subtasks in the self-direction life task. It was then modified to include new subtasks of self-direction, bringing the total of subtasks to 12. And that's the model that we're going to take a look at here in this next diagram. So the model includes spirituality at the core or the center as being the most important component of wellness. This placement is not by accident. So the literature supports that, that center placement of spirituality is really, what drives us. It's a driving force for a lot of people in terms of behaviors and how they navigate life's challenges. The task of self-direction, those tasks, those 12, they function like spokes in a wheel. So they point outward from spirituality, okay? And they provide us with the self-management skills needed to meet Adler's life tasks of work, friendship, and love. So it goes back to that. Surrounding the wheel then, on the outside, are forces. So these forces can affect personal wellness. So things like your family, okay? Your family system, education, business and industry, which has to do with occupational health, which we're going to talk about, media, government, and your community, the greater community where you live. All of these things we know can impact us in terms of our wellness. Also, global forces like pandemics, natural disasters, war, okay, some things that we've unfortunately seen over the past couple of years. These can also affect the individual's progress towards wellness. So here's that model with the 12 spokes. And while it might be a little harder for you guys to see, I can kind of read it and guide you through it. So again, spirituality is at the core center, okay, kind of really navigating how we navigate our world, okay? We've got those major life tasks of love, work and leisure, and friendship, okay? And then we also have those 12 spokes in the wheel. So these are the self-direction tasks that give us the self-management skills to be able to strive towards these things that we value, okay? So we're not going to talk about all of the 12 tasks today, but I will name some of them for you. So we've got gender identity, cultural identity, personal sense of worth, sense of control, realistic beliefs, emotional awareness and coping, problem solving and creativity, a sense of humor, so important for health, nutrition, exercise. Sometimes the wellness literature and hype is about these 2 things when you can see it's so much more, okay? Self-care, we've been talking a lot about that this semester. Stress management, okay? So those are the 12 self-direction tasks or spokes in the wheel. All right, so we're moving on to occupational stress now that we have that kind of foundation of the Wheel of Wellness model. I wanted to just talk a little bit about occupational stress and how it harms us. Now, the focus of today is more on the positive, but just, it's good to know, about stress and how it can be damaging, okay? Occupational stress or de-stress can result from prolonged, frequent, or intense exposure to stress at work. We know that it can occur in 3 forms. So it can be medical, it can be psychological, and it can come across in behavioral ways. In terms of the medical, so in the research, it says that occupational stress has been linked with cardiovascular disease, unfortunately, also the onset of certain cancers in some instances, and then musculoskeletal conditions associated with injury. So that's more like in relation to workplace injury. In terms of the psychological, anxiety and depression are the 2 leading presenting complaints associated with work-related stress, with burnout being the 3rd. And burnout is a term that people throw around, but it is actually defined as a state of emotional exhaustion or depersonalization. That's when you don't feel as connected to yourself, or cynicism, and or lack of personal accomplishment, or a feeling of a lack of personal accomplishment associated with work-related stress, okay? So if somebody were feeling any of those things in relation to work-related stress, that might be like a red flag that that person might be feeling a little bit of burnout, okay? And that might be a good time to check in with one's medical doctor, mental health resources, to talk more about that. Behavioral is the third category. So leading forms of behavioral distress related to occupational stress, so this is how people act out on that stress in terms of behaviors, would be things like tobacco abuse, alcohol and drug abuse, aggression and violence, and or accidents, okay, getting into accidents. And we can kind of see the accident part because if someone is so preoccupied with that stress, they might be more distracted, more prone to things like auto accidents or accidents on the job. Okay. So that's how it can harm us. But again, we're switching to the positive. So we're trying to avoid those things. Moving forward here. Okay, so going back to the Wheel of Wellness model, and we were talking about the self-direction tasks. That particular Wheel of Wellness model that was updated from the original is sometimes called the essential self model. The indivisible self, my apologies. Because again, it's kind of rooted in that construct of holism, okay? So everything is interrelated. Here are 4 self-direction tasks that I feel impact occupational wellness. I wanted to talk to you about the 4, and then we've got examples and we can have some discussion on each one of them, okay? So as far as the essential self, self-care. Okay, so the task is essential self. Self-care is what we focus on in terms of that category. And we're going to talk about that in a separate slide. Creative self. Okay, now we think about creativity like fine arts talent, drawing and painting and photography and things like that. But in terms of our wellness and in terms of this self-direction construct, we're thinking about it in terms of creativity in problem solving, in meeting challenges, in meeting demands at work, how we accomplish all of that, okay, how we go about that. If we can navigate that in creative form, then we're going to be more inclined to be successful to roll with the punches, as they say, okay? We're going to be more thriving, okay? The coping self is the next category, and that would be like having realistic beliefs, okay? So believing in the positive, kind of having that viewpoint, not believing that the world is out to get you, that kind of thing. But also just having realistic beliefs, in your abilities and setting goals in accordance to those beliefs that are founded in realistic thought. Stress management, having self-worth, and going back to self-care, that balance of work and leisure is so important. It's almost like a yin and yang. If you don't have the leisure, you might as well not go to work. And I know you guys talk about this all semester, but if you don't have a balance, that burnout thing is going to come up very quickly, okay? So leisure is just that important. And then social self or friendship, okay? And many of us have connections and things like that, but there's actually research that shows that having friendship and connections at work is a stress buffering, thing. So it actually can reduce stress if you have those friendships and connections, not only in your outside life, but also at work. All right, moving forward. So going back to the essential self, that spoke on the wheel, and self-care. This is where I wanted to get some audience participation. This is how we take care of ourselves at work. So I wanted to hear from you guys. What are you already doing throughout your workday and in your non-work hours? Okay, because we take care of self-care in both places, at work and in non-work hours. What are you doing in those 2 areas to actively achieve self-care or balance? Name some strategies. We'll get to that one in a second. So let's start with that first question. What are you guys doing? And we have a couple audience members here today that might want to share, or Sophia can look at the chat to see any comments. Yes, Jay.
Something I do during the work days, like to get into the Cougar Thrive classes, you go to yoga.
Okay, Cougar Thrive classes, free to staff and students. Is that right?
I think there's a small fee, but it's very reasonable.
Thank you. Okay, small fee associated, but yoga on Mondays. Okay, yes, so checking that out. Wonderful example. Anybody else?
Yeah, actually, just taking a walk. Just taking a walk around campus, or just getting away from your desk.
Yes. I do the walk too. I have a lap. I have a route that I take. Yeah, it's actually very nice. It goes around the outside of campus. I do the same thing. Sophia.
I make sure to share any concerns or any feelings that I have with people in my office to just kind of vent, but also to get advice and to just form community
Yes.
with my peers.
So not working in isolation, but checking in behaviors, checking in with others, making sure, hey, did you feel a little bit stressed after that? Or, hey, what would you do in this situation? That kind of thing. Very important. Anybody in the audience, the virtual audience?
Yes, we have 2 messages in the chat, 3. One person said, I take about 30 minutes in a day to kind of deep breathe or meditate. I also do that. It's great. Another one was eating well, student massage clinic. Yes, absolutely. Work towards getting my 10,000 steps. Sharing jokes, funny, heartwarming memes with others, sharing gratitude for small things. And then stretching every hour and taking several walks, short walks throughout the day.
That's really cool. These are all great examples. And I'm hearing a variety of different things in there, from exercise to just like meditation to checking in like the social things that we can do to be connected with people. So these are all wonderful things. Thank you for sharing, everybody. All right. So another construct, another spoke in the wheel, if you will, is the creative self. So again, we're looking at this as creativity and problem solving and navigating life's challenges, specifically at work. How we feel at work and about work. Okay, that's kind of what this is all about. So I know there's a lot of text on this slide, but I didn't want to misspeak here. I wanted to kind of read a little bit of this word for word for me so don't miss it. But I liked this quote that I found in the literature. So enriching one's ability to think clearly, perceive accurately, and respond appropriately can decrease stress and enhance the humor response, which research has shown affects the immune system positively. So I don't know if you knew that, but humor actually boosts the immune system. And this is kind of addressing that bigger concept of how we feel is really, really, really important. Okay, if we're walking around with kind of a negative mindset, and maybe we didn't cause it, maybe there's just stuff going on and it's given us this negative mindset, but walking around with it, that's problematic. Okay, so I wanted to also talk about, and this is kind of a counseling thing, but back in the 1960s, there was a psychologist named Aaron Beck, and he developed what we call cognitive behavioral therapy. It's one of the most widely, used forms of therapy for a variety of different DSM diagnoses, but very popular in treating like mood disorders like depression, anxiety. And really what it is all about, it's about managing our thoughts, taking a look at our thoughts, being mindful of our thoughts in response to how we're then going to react or behave, okay? So first, examining our thoughts before we give a response or behavior in a certain situation. There's all kinds of techniques associated with that I won't go into. Negative thought stopping is one of them, things like that. But this is a walk around thing that you and I can do. We can be mindful of our thoughts. We can be cognizant of how we feel. We can check in with ourselves. And like Sophia was saying, we can check in with other people, okay? And then I wanted to point out effective problem solving and navigating workplace relationships, challenges, and conflicts is an example of creativity and problem solving. So we can get better at this. We can get more creative at it. I also wanted to point out, so how we feel at work, I think, is an integral part of career management in general, okay? And feeling a sense of control at work. And I also wanted to point these things out that didn't make the slide. So having predictability in one's schedule, that can be comforting for some people. Having predictable routines, having a predictable workplace structure with some room to, growing and adapting, because we know we have to do that, grow and adapt to new methods and things like that. So having some open-mindedness to that. Having a sense of authority over one's work and a sense of, that your supervisor has confidence in your abilities. That's very, very important. Having fairness in how, workers are evaluated in the workplace. Very, very important. Knowledge that one is not being exploited or overworked at work. Okay, so these are all, part of that feeling of a sense of control. having adequate compensation in relation to work duties, okay, things like that. And these are all kinds of things like when you're job interviewing, when you're looking at positions and opportunities, there's a way to evaluate work culture, okay, to try to figure out, what's going on. Is this a situation where there's a lot of burnout or turnover or things like that? And we kind of want to avoid those situations if possible. If one ever finds oneself in that type of situation, then that's a time to kind of pull back, stop and think, is this particular, work position, work climate serving me? If not, connect with a career counselor. Like at any point in life, one can shift career direction. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up. Okay. Health in the workplace is important, and part of that is that sense of control. So the next one, the coping self, is the construct, and this is all about like having realistic beliefs and a sense of self-worth, okay? So believing in oneself at work, very, very important. I think we can all attest that when we've worked in environments where we felt successful, we also felt good, okay? That's very, very important. Those are very closely connected. Self-efficacy is kind of what we're talking about here. And self-efficacy is a person's belief in their ability to succeed in a particular situation. And this was a construct that was developed by Alfred Bandura, okay, back in the 90s. Self-efficacy and self-worth can be bolstered at work through many things, but here's a few, okay? So your own achievement of performance benchmarks. When we do a good job, we pat ourselves on the back, maybe our coworkers and our boss, pat us on the back and we feel good, okay? Positive feedback and encouragement from your constituents, okay? That's your colleagues. Observing one's performance in comparison with colleagues, okay? Not as a thing of like, not like sizing yourself up, like, do I compare with so-and-so? Because that's got a negative connotation, but more like, can I shadow and learn and observe and skill build from sort of mirroring or watching this person, okay? So that's like a dynamic work environment in which everybody can grow and thrive when we kind of observe and learn from each other. And that's kind of what that's speaking to. And I just wanted to stop and see if there's any questions at this point. Okay.
I just want to say, I really liked how you added workplace culture, because I feel like a lot of the times employers are being told, you gotta practice better self-care, and it puts the blame on the employer, but it really is a two-way street, and the workplace needs to help that self-care and needs to create a culture.
There's a lot of talk about that, and I think the pandemic, and thank you for bringing that up, because the pandemic really brought that to a more focus, I think, with a lot of articles and things I saw on LinkedIn and everything, and definitely, yeah, it is a two-way street. The coworker is just as responsible as the employer for making that happen. I agree. Thank you. Wonderful. So I just want to make sure I touch base on everything I wanted to as far as that slide. Yeah. Yes. I also just wanted to say there was an interesting study of salespeople. Okay. So a lot of people think, oh, sales is an industry where people are motivated by compensation. You sell a lot of things and you get, compensated. There's a structure for that, bonuses and whatnot. But there was an interesting article that said that sense of purpose was, in one case, in this one study, a higher motivating factor for salespeople than compensation structure. So people really want to feel like they're doing work that's making a difference, a contribution. I know that's the case in my profession because I'm in one of the helping professions. But I wanted to bring that up because I think that's the case in a lot of professions, and we dismiss that when someone's not in a traditional helping profession. Other people are motivated by making a difference, having a sense of purpose about their work. So I want to bring that up. Okay. So realistic beliefs, come into play, and self-efficacy. And I wanted to bring this slide up because our sense of worth, this is kind of how it's determined, and I wanted to bring these up. I just found this graphic online and I liked it, so I just put it up here. We talked about the performance outcomes, so positive or negative reinforcement, hopefully it's positive, and we have that positive reinforcement about our work. That's going to boost us up and up and up and make us feel good, and it's going to make that self-efficacy go up. In terms of vicarious experiences, people can develop high or low self-efficacy vicariously through other people's performances. A person can watch another person perform and then compare their competence with that individual's in order to learn, okay? Verbal persuasion, so self-efficacy is influenced by encouragement and discouragement pertaining to one's performance. So what we say to people really, really matters. You know, we talk about sticks and stones will break my bones, but words really matter, and that positive reinforcement is so helpful. We can do it for each other. Managers, supervisors can do it for colleagues and things like that. And then physiological feedback. This is when our body tells us something is going good or something is going bad. So listening to that body feedback. If we're starting to get like tummy rumbles or we get really anxious or things like that, then we might know that something is awry. Okay, so just kind of paying attention to those physiological forms of feedback. Okay. I just wanted to show that. I really liked that graphic. So the last of the four is the social. Okay, we talked about, I know you guys have been talking about wellness all semester and the importance of social relationships. Going back to the blue zone example, there's different zones across the globe where people are living really, really long lives. Okay, Loma Linda, California, Okinawa, Japan is one of those blue zones. And the reason why people were living long in that area, according to researchers, is that those people were living in this fishing village for hundreds of years. They had these houses with shutters, I think they were wooden, and they had to open them with sticks. They opened up the shutters. And one of the routines in the little village was every morning they would open up their shutters to let the neighbors know, I woke up today. You know, I'm here, I'm in the village, I woke up today, I'm opening up my home, etc. So it was all about that social connection in the village, okay? So we know that there's such an importance with social connection and friendship. Psychological hazards related to culture within an organization, such as poor interpersonal relations, a lack of policies and practices related to respect for workers, discrimination of any kind. These are significant contributors to workplace stress, obviously, obviously. Prolonged exposure to these psychosocial hazards is related to increased psychiatric and physiological health problems, as we talked about earlier. Conversely, when relationships in the workplace are characterized by cooperation, trust, fairness, the reward center in the brain is activated, which encourages future interactions that promote employee trust, respect, and confidence. So good vibes breed good vibes is the takeaway here. And those employees then will believe the best in each other and in themselves, which is going to increase productivity and performance. So you can see how all these things kind of feed into each other. But having friendships or at least supportive relationships at work is a buffering effect against occupational stress. Okay, now I'm moving into something completely different, kind of. So I wanted to stop and just do a checkpoint and see how we are with questions or comments.
The only question in the chat was discussing the transition back to work after COVID. And how it was really hard to, when you're so focused on self-care when the pandemic first started, and so moving back to working in person in the office.
Yes, yes, and I want to take Jay's comment too, and then we can talk about both. Yeah.
It's actually just a question that
Yeah.
I've heard from people throughout the years.
Yeah.
They feel like, some people feel like their field, just like the nature of the field that they work in, that typically their businesses don't really put a lot into like personal development.
Yes.
So they feel like they're lacking there. What advice do you have for people like that?
When you say personal development, like self-care, stress management kind of things, or?
Yeah, like their field in general, they feel like it's hard to find a business in that field that really cares about their employees as a human.
Got you. Okay. Okay. So a couple good questions. Starting with Sophia's question about that transition back to the workplace. I also felt that transition. I think a lot of people did, where, you know, maybe we slightly kind of play with our work schedule and, you know, we take that walk at 4:30 rather than, you know, the regular quitting time of 5 o'clock, but we give the company back that time a little bit later in the evening or whatever. So some of that greater flexibility, I think, was lost, or could have been lost when one is trying to transition and come back. But I think this is how I try to look at it with a positive framework. It's not lost in that the importance of how great that was when we took that focus on and put it on ourselves during that time, and how we can kind of keep that going. I think that's the conversation for now. And it's a conversation that you have with yourself, like, self, what am I going to do to keep that great thing going that I was doing, all that great wellness and things like that. But it's also a conversation I know that in our office we've had as a team, like, how can we keep that going in terms of, like, you know, workplace wellness and things like that. And then as a college level, and then, you know, out into the community and so forth. So as far as, like, you know, Jay's question, Jay had a question. Certain industries may not have a reputation for providing the best, most healthiest kind of workplace for workers. And without naming any industries, you know, we've all kind of heard that. Definitely, we've heard that. And then there's other things like we talked about, like global forces. So the pandemic, I know, really hit hard our frontline healthcare workers, for example. Okay, that was really hard for people on the front lines. But, you know, for those industries that don't traditionally have, you know, wellness practices in place and things like that for employees, I think that you start somewhere, and sometimes the start has to happen from the employee. So sometimes the employee has to have that sort of confidence to be able to speak up to whomever will listen. So it could be like a direct supervisor, it could be get a coworker, welcome, get a coworker involved, and then maybe approach supervisor, or, you know, approach HR or something like that, or, you know, start a movement like within, you know, ERGs and things like that. And just start the conversation and start talking about it. I think that's really the most important thing that we can do, because as Sophia said earlier, this is a two-way street, and we have half the responsibility of making the workplace healthy and well for everybody. So those are good questions. All right, so I wanted to do an activity with you guys after I briefly talk about career decision-making. And if you have already participated in a career assessment and you know exactly what you want to be for career, you do not have to do this, but you can just sit alongside those of us that are going to take 5 minutes to do this. But I just wanted to bring up that making a career decision is part of occupational wellness, because really getting into the right career from the front end, and we know that that's not perfect science, because we know that people change jobs and careers on average 5 to 7 times across the lifespan, which is normal. Okay, I'm just normalizing that. But we can make a great decision for our first career. Okay, so as college students, we want that to be an informed decision with lots of information based on a variety of factors, and mostly that's on self, and then that's on labor market research. Okay, so self-knowledge paired with labor market research. So some of those factors are, what are you interested in? Like, what are your work interests? What are you good at? What do you like to do? How would you like to spend your days doing what? Okay. Certain personality factors. So, you know, are you more of an introvert? You know, if that's the case, maybe you don't want to do a lot of public speaking for your position, things like that. Like, you know, there's a part of us that wants to stretch ourselves and grow, and that's really important. But we can also honor who we are as a person and set ourselves up for success by picking the right work environment. Work values. So we all have morals and values. Work values are about what we want out of work at a given time. Okay, so before I became a parent, I wanted different things out of work than, let's say, after I had children. Okay, I was looking for a different type of work situation. Okay, and our work values can change like that over time. So work values have everything to do with things like salary, work structure, work roles, flexibility, you know, virtual versus hybrid versus in person, compensation, opportunities for professional growth, tuition reimbursement, how much education we have to complete to enter that field, how much money and time we have to devote to education, things like that. And then the last piece is labor market information. So, you know, we don't want to go into a career in which there's like 1 to 3 job openings in Columbus for that particular thing. I mean, we could, but I mean, it would be difficult. It would be a hard road. So we want to look for careers that, you know, they're growing and there's a demand for the positions, or at least the demand for the jobs is in keeping with how many graduates are output every year. Okay, so we want to look for that kind of information. Question? Yes, this time, yes, I see Brett. No, you're fine. Okay, so we have one more person joining us. Welcome. So talking about making that career decision, so taking that time to make a decision based on information and self-knowledge is so important. It's one of the most important things you can do as a college student. And I think of those different factors to consider as like pieces in a puzzle. So I put this graphic up here. So your interests in work, what you're interested in, your values, what you want out of that work situation, your personality traits, and the labor market information that's out there to inform your decision. I wanted to tell you, hold on one second. Okay, so activity time. If you so choose, and you don't have to participate, but you can take 5 minutes, it just takes 5 minutes. You can use your smartphone if you have one, and you could go to cscc.edu/career coach, okay? You can go there and then I'll guide you as to next steps, okay? So it's cscc.edu/career coach, all lowercase. Everybody's there. Okay, I'm there. Okay, so then you click on take the career assessment. It should be like a little blue box. And if it gives you the option, which it should if you scroll down, you want to take the 6-question version. Otherwise, it will take longer. And then a question pops up. It says, don't worry about. So it says, don't worry about how much education or training that you need to do the work or how much money you will make. Now, those things are very important, as we know. But as far as taking this test is concerned, factor those out of your mind for the moment, because you really just want to look at the work tasks and evaluate them based on your interest. So it's going to give you 6 different questions. Read the work tasks associated with each question, and then rank how much you like doing those tasks from strongly agree to strongly disagree, and then just keep scrolling through. Okay? So for those of you that are at the end, you're going to see a couple things with your test result. You're going to see your top 3 traits at the top, and then you're going to see your top industry matches or your top career matches at the bottom. Okay, both of them are important. If you were to want to schedule an appointment with Career Services to talk about the results of this test, we could have a sit-down conversation and we can basically explain what do those top 3 traits even mean, okay? I'm going to scroll to that screen next and show you. So those top 3 traits, it's another word for interest. So really this was a test to assess your work interests, and it's divided into these 6 categories. You probably had 3 categories come up like I did. My categories were social, enterprising, and artistic, okay? You might have had 3 completely different categories, or you might have had a couple in common with me. But basically, these are the categories defined, and all of this is based on a theory by John Holland, who came up with we call it the Ryasic theory, which organizes work interests and matching careers into these 6 different categories. So the premise is that you should look for careers that match your interests as closely as possible. Now, most people are not going to necessarily go with a 3-category match in what they do. Most people are walking around maybe with 2 of the categories match. But if you're looking at careers that are completely opposite from what you indicated your interests are, that's when I want to sit down and talk with you, because you want to kind of stay within your wheelhouse of interest when it comes to career, okay? So here are those categories defined. And just a quick glance, you can kind of see that realistic, those are people who like to work with their hands, work outdoors, or work with tools and equipment. Those tools can be computers, so a lot of IT people fall into that category. But so do people that do agriculture, so do massage therapists working with your hands, even healthcare, because a lot of healthcare is working with our hands, with patients. Investigative is those that are interested in research or problem solving of any kind. So that could be research like being a police detective, that could be research like being a college professor, so it's a wide range, okay? But just using that analytical thinking, critical thinking, research, and problem solving skill sets. Artistic, those people are creative. Maybe they have a fine art ability that they're really good at. Maybe they just have an interest in the fine arts. or they are people who want to use creative thinking in some way, shape, or form in their future career, okay? Social, this is one of mine. They have an interest in the helping professions and working directly with a customer, a client, a student, a patient, someone on the other end of that helping relationship. Teaching, education is a social profession, okay? Ministry, counseling, okay? Healthcare, okay? Enterprising, these people are interested in either leadership, management, or using skills of communication in their work, maybe through training, things like that, teaching, okay? And then conventional, these folks excel at organization skills. So this is often like our office associates, our secretarial people, our accountants, people who are good at numbers, people who are good at data management, things like that, or people that just thrive on structure. So they might prefer a more structured work environment, okay? So hopefully that was a nice little test that gave you a little indication of what your work interests are, just a little peek, you know. If that test prompted you to maybe want to come in and talk to a career counselor about what you're interested in, we welcome that. Going back a slide here really quick. Our contact information, you can schedule through Starfish if you're familiar with Starfish. Handshake is another way to schedule if you're on Handshake. You can call to schedule, our numbers here. And you can set up a career counseling appointment to meet with a counselor to go over your results, to look at careers. The other half of Career Coach, which is the website that you took your test on, is a whole career research website. So we can look up some of that labor market information, that occupational data. We can look at salary information, job growth in Central Ohio. We can look at who's hiring in your industry. We can look at all of that, okay? So come and see us if you need that additional support. Another thing that we often do through some of our programs and even in one-on-one is we will connect students with professionals in their field of interest for a one-on-one conversation. So if you just really want to confirm that you really want to go into this versus this, like maybe you've narrowed it down to a couple different things, we can connect you with professionals in your field. Okay. So come and see us. And I see that we have about 10 minutes left maybe before questions. So I didn't mean to give intellectual wellness, the small portion of this conversation, but we have to kind of crunch it and get it in here. So I will start off by saying I am less of an expert in this than I am in the occupational for obvious reasons, but I did find some great research on the topic and I wanted to bring this to your attention. So back when we were saying, so we're kind of shifting to cognitive and intellectual wellness. Back when we were talking about wellness in general and how everything is interrelated, I was really excited to see this study by Harvard Health. So researchers cited 6 key factors in maintaining a healthy body and brain, okay? One of which is a plant-based diet, okay? So they talked about like a vegetarian diet, or doesn't have to be that strict, but a diet that's rich in fruits, vegetables, and grains is important for body and brain health. Regular exercise, and again, not perfect exercise. It's not a perfect, it's more about how many touch points with exercise. It's more about that we don't give up with an exercise routine. Okay, it's not about being perfect. Good sleep habits. There's so many studies with sleep. There's a lot of studies recently about a connection between poor sleep and development of Alzheimer's in some cases. So it's really, really important that we're getting our required amount of sleep. And actually, it kind of goes down over time. So where infants need the most sleep, elderly people need the least. So our sleep needs kind of go down over time. But we want to be making sure that we're getting the right amount for our age group. Stress reduction, so important. We keep talking about that, social involvement, and then challenging your brain. And that's the category that I wanted to talk with you guys a little bit more about here this afternoon. So as far as like college student intellectual wellness, I found this actually, University of New Hampshire had a great website on wellness. And I pulled some of these strategies right from there. So development of good study skills and time management. Now, a lot of you have taken Coles 1100. Coles 1100 does a great job of going over study skills, time management. Very important. The ability to challenge yourself to see all sides of an issue. Okay, very important. we talk a lot about diversity, and I think the diversity transcends into the classroom. It's diversity of thought. It's being able to, take in perspectives and sit with them and soak with them before coming up with your snap decision, okay? So really taking in all sides of an issue before you come to a conclusion. That helps us become better critical thinkers. Developing your own ideas, viewpoints, opinions based on all of that, exposing yourself to new ideas, people, and beliefs. So in other words, cultural experiences and social experiences help our brain to grow, okay? Becoming aware of who you are and what you value. So sometimes new experiences can change brain chemistry. And that was something that I learned when I got my counseling training is, you don't have to be born with, let's say, depression, but sometimes an activating event can change your brain chemistry and give you depression, okay? So similarly, an activating event, something that you encounter or participate or do, like travel to another country, can change. It can rewire and it can fire synapses in our brain that weren't firing before. And this grows us. It grows our brain and it grows us. And it's very exciting. We can't all afford to go, overseas for travel, but we can all afford to participate in cultural experiences. And I think that's one great thing about Columbus State is they offer a lot of things that we can take advantage of that are free and right in our backyard. But going back to study skills, again, University of New Hampshire, thank you for your information. I took this from you. Reviewing your notes within 24 hours of class to keep things fresh in your memory. Some of this we talk about in Coles too. Taking notes while you read in class, using your notes to develop quizzes or study aids. So not just looking at the material and interacting with it in one form, but changing the material, making it into something new, like a study aid, and interacting with it like that is very helpful for getting things into the long-term memory. Forming a study group, so social learners, this is very helpful for you if you want to study with other people, that can be very beneficial. Study in a quiet environment, void of distractions, unless you need distractions, and everybody's different. Color code your notes to differentiate information. Use one color per topic, or come up with a system that works for you so you can remember the information. Finding innovative ways to study that work for you based on your learning style. And in Coles 1100, we take the learning style assessment. It's part of the class, figuring out what learning styles you prefer, but knowing that you have to adjust and change based on, the assignment, the teacher, what have you. Okay. I found these online too, and I've got a slide with all the references where I found all this information. So I didn't really put the focus of this on working with people who have cognitive decline, because I think that's a whole other set of research, but this is just people in general, okay, 6 ways to improve cognitive functioning. Again, we're talking about new experiences to expand, how our brain fires, synapses, just changing that brain chemistry. They say that learning a new language does that, okay, so it helps with mental agility. Since language skills forge new connections amongst neurons. Listening to or making music activates multiple brain areas, including those that process emotions, memory, and movement. Doing games. This is something that, like every holiday, we just did this over Easter, my extended family, we bring out board games. I know it's weird, but we love board games. Maybe other people do that. And things like Trivial Pursuit, they build memory, while games like Monopoly help with math skills, financial skills. Even some of your video games, strategy and 3D adventure.
Sorry, folks, having quick technical difficulties, but I'm just gonna turn my computer around and we'll present that way.
I'm figuring it out. I think there's like one slide left, but does anybody have any questions or comments about what we talked about, like in terms of like the cognitive and the intellectual wellness? Students in particular, are there certain strategies that you use? Have you opened your mind to some kind of skills this semester that you would be willing to share out with the group? Genevieve has a comment.
Oh, I think that's personal.
Oh, okay. She has a comment to her team. It was personal. Sorry. But yeah, I just, I want to say like, oh, we got a comment in the chat. Will you please share your PowerPoint? Oh, this has been an excellent presentation. Thank you, Susan. That's so nice. Yes, for sure. I can share it with these ladies and they can share it out with everybody that participated today. Back when I was earlier in my career counselor, I did take a 120-hour wellness counseling certification course, and it was just one of the best experiences I ever had. Like, we learned so much about alternative healthcare options. Not that we could provide those options for clients because we're not licensed providers of those things, but just that I had an awareness of different ways that people can make themselves healthy and well, and what makes a person well based on the research. And I love wellness. I ascribe to it. It's something I strive for all the time. People that know me know I'm not perfect, but it's not about perfection. It's like it's not about like even New Year's resolutions that come and go. It's a lifestyle, as I think probably some of you on this call have experienced before. And it really, I like it because it's holistic. I like it because it doesn't leave anything out. Like, it has spiritual, it has fitness and exercise, it has the way we relate with people, cultural experiences, like all of these things that I think make us healthy and well. So that's all I wanted to say about that. But I know there's one more slide I didn't get to with the tips for improving cognitive functioning. So you guys are going to get that when you get a copy of this presentation. Are there any so Sophia's trying to get in. Sorry about that. Are there any final questions that I can answer for you this afternoon? Yes, this is the last of this topic, so thank you for joining us for this series, and I appreciate you guys coming out today.